Hey everybody, it's time to talk some Kentucky football here on the Longhorn Confidential podcast. We brought in an expert. We brought in Ryan Black of the Louisville Courier-Journal. Brian, I was going over your resume before we jumped on. Georgia grads, you've covered the Bulldogs, you covered Auburn in your career, you covered some Michigan State, and now you got some Kentucky. So you've seen some football in your days. You can read Ryan's work, obviously, over at the courierjournal.com. There's a hyphen between Courier and Journal there, or follow him on Twitter at Ryan A. Black. Ryan, how you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing really well. And actually, you missed. I was at Kansas State for 4.5 years. That's actually the longest stop in my career path at the Manhattan Mercury.
I guess I'm a little less thorough than you. Actually, I did see the Kansas State thing. I just forgot to write it down.
Yeah. No, all good. All good.
Ryan's actually talking to us from the terminal over at O'Hare. He's coming back from the SEC tip-off, so maybe we'll get to talk some basketball in this in this short little conversation we have. But football goes first. Texas this weekend visiting Kentucky. Texas 4-2, 1-1 in SEC play. Kentucky is 2-3, 0-3 in SEC play. 7 p.m. kick if you're in Lexington, 6 p.m. back in Austin, and watch it on ESPN. Got all that out of the way. But Ryan, the Wildcats, they're picked to finish second to last in the SEC this season. So maybe this isn't a huge surprise that they've struggled this year. But from what you've seen, what has kind of been their Achilles heel throughout the season? Why are they kind of been unable to get off the snide in conference play?
Well, Danny, it's kind of the exact same issue that was the issue last season when they went 4-8 and 1-7 in the SEC. They cannot produce enough points offensively, and maybe 50, 60 years ago, that would be fine. But in modern college football, if you're scoring at least close to 30 points a game, then you're not going to win. And I'm sure this is a stat. If you haven't seen it from me, you've seen it and heard it repeated elsewhere. But this is now second-year coordinator, Bush Hamdan. Kentucky's offense has not scored more than 2 touchdowns against any power conference opponent that they played since he's been. Again, I'm not counting, obviously if you remember Barry on Brown, LSU, he returned a lot of kicks for touchdowns, but in terms of offensive touchdowns, Kentucky has not scored more than 2 against any power conference foe under his guidance. And that's not a winning formula, Danny. It's not a winning formula.
Kentucky kind of had a weird schedule so far this season. They've actually played 2 non-conference games. I believe they've had 2 byes and 3 SEC games, which maybe is not the biggest recipe for success, but they were off last week. What have kind of the Wildcats been working on during these byes? And, what was kind of the message there in Lexington as they tried to prep for Texas?
Well, I mean, one thing that Mark Stoops mentioned, coming off the bye was just, they had some guys banged up and they were trying to get healthy. And, even though it's maybe not something that they would say publicly, I mean, Danny, right, when you're struggling to the extent that Kentucky has struggled for the last year and a half, basically, just keeping the positive morale is something, right? Because it's just when a losing streak continues just to go on, or right at some point, it's hard to keep the faith, so to speak. But I think that's been a big thing for them. And they're saying all the right things, Danny, but I guess at the same time, it's like, you can say all the right things, but then when you're not actually getting those results on Saturday, it's just a pretty frustrating thing to deal with for your player.
Do you think that a path to a bowl game exists? Obviously, with 2 wins, you need 4 more. It's not easy in SEC play, but they do have 2 non-conference games, including one against Louisville, which is not going to be easy. No. But does a path to a bowl game exist for this team?
Well, I don't say this too. The one non-con game they have against Tennessee Tech. Tennessee Tech is one of the best FCS teams on their top 10, and at one point they were averaging, I think, close to 50 a game. That's come down just slightly. But Danny, I'll put it this way: if I was a betting man, I wouldn't say that. But I mean, the path you'd say is like you said, if you win the 2 non-con games, I mean, like I said, Louisville is certainly no gimme, even though Kentucky in recent years has dominated that rivalry. But I think you'd look at the 2 games that would be the other 2 that you need. It's okay. What happens with Florida? I mean, they might have a coach who's out, or obviously they have a coach on the hot seat with Billy Napier, and the same with Auburn. So another coach, with Hugh Freeze coach for his job. So I mean, those would be the only other 2 games that you're like, maybe they'll have a puncher's chance in it, but this week and next week against Tennessee are going to be tough.
Obviously Seth McGowan's kind of the guy in offense. Aside from him, is there an offensive player that you would circle on your scouting report if you're getting ready for this Kentucky team?
Oh, well, one thing I have to say, and this being my 4th season covering this team, year after year after year, you would hear like, oh, hey, we got these talented tight ends. Oh, we're going to involve them in the passing game. then they would never actually be involved in the passing game. But Josh Caddis, Willie Rodriguez, they've got some guys who actually are making plays, in the passing game. Now, granted, not as many as you need, but they still have been obviously more involved than they've been in previous years. And I guess, Danny, on the flip side, that kind of the fact I didn't highlight a wide receiver is a bad thing, but they came out of camp saying we don't have a true number one. We hope to identify it during the season, and that's not happened yet. So it's there are multiple candidates for that, but just none of them have kind of stepped to the fore and really taken on that role.
On the flip side, what about this Kentucky defense? Is there anyone kind of standing on that side of the ball?
Well, Alex Afari, he's a guy who started his career, came in and basically as a corner, and then he kept growing, and they moved him to safety, and now he's a linebacker, and he's probably been their most consistent defensive performer. Jordan Lovett who was one of their SEC Media Days representatives, has been very solid. Uh, Ty Bryant as well, multiple interceptions this year. So I mean, the secondary has been solid. They've obviously had some breakdowns and given up some explosive plays, but all around, those would be the three guys I would say would be the three to really look at.
Well, we got to talk a little
Yeah.
basketball.
Yeah.
Since you are traveling home and trying to get home
Mhm.
safely from Birmingham, you and CL Brown are over, at the
Mhm.
SEC tip off past couple of days. How's Kentucky looking? Obviously, I think they're coming to Austin. I don't know if you get to make that trip in a couple in February, but how is this Kentucky basketball team looking?
Well, I mean, I picked them exactly where they were projected here this season, to finish the SEC, which is second behind Florida. Those two teams played twice in the regular season. Last season, they only played once, and Kentucky beat them at Rupp. That was Florida's first loss last season of only four they had all year on the way to national championship. I think, Danny, think about this is when you have a guy like Otega Owe, who, you maybe know was his name the preseason player of the year. And he was a guy who scored in double digits almost every single game. When you have a guy that you basically know you can go to and he's going to get you 15 to 20 every night, that makes it a lot easier to build around everybody else. They have three more returnees: Brandon Garrison, who's expected to step in to replace Amari Williams at center. Then they have Trent Noah, the in-state guy who people love in Kentucky because they just love their in-state guys. And then Colin Chandler, who made a huge leap at the end of last season. He was a guy who's coming off a 2-year Mormon mission and basically had not played any basketball for years. And he's kind of getting back into the groove of things. In terms of what they brought on the transfer portal, Jalen Lowe from Pitt, he's going to be the starting point guard. Denzel Aberdeen, who came from Florida, just won a national championship. You just kind of go on and on. Really, the guy I'm most interested to see, if you want to know the truth, is they signed Andrei Yelovich, who was one of the top international prospects from Croatia, and he wasn't able to go through the summer with the team with the workouts because he was still wrapping up things in Europe. But this is a very, 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 very deep roster, and I would be shocked if they don't at least go as far as last season, which was the Sweet 16. And I'll put it this way: I know if that's where they end up finishing, the fan base will be pretty disappointed because they have higher expectations of this Sweet 16 this year.
Now, obviously, Kentucky basketball, kind of the show in town. I'm sure that's a pretty cool event to go to. Kentucky football, see better days. The baseball team had a good season a
Hmm.
couple of years ago. Volleyball team has won a championship recently. But the thing I want to ask you about,
Yeah, please.
what is it like to cover a Kentucky Derby? What is that event like? I'm sure that it seems whenever I watch it on TV, it seems pretty cool. I know you've at least been to one. I saw a byline
Yeah,
from that.
yeah, well, yeah, I've covered three now, and Danny, for me, it, and I just go through. I think about all these different events that I've covered, I'm thankful I've covered a lot of big time things, whether it's you know BCS championship back when the BCS was still the thing in college football, and SEC championship football games, and then K State basketball, which was great, but I just don't think there's anything like the Derby because you've got 150 plus thousand people there, and then just when you actually feel the horses go by you, on the front stretch, it's just and then of course especially if there's a close race coming down the stretch and you just hear the crowd drowning out everything. It's uh it's the most unbelievable thing I've ever covered. I love NASCAR and I covered some races, but there it's a little more sterile because right, it's cars, and they obviously are so loud they drown out the crowd. So I just feel like of all the things I've covered, the derbies have been my favorites in terms of the environment.
It's not maybe one of these days I can get that on my bucket list.
I hope so. Just make sure you bring a lot of money because it's expensive. It is expensive to get a ticket.
Awesome. Well, that is Ryan Black. We got to get him on a plane, get him home. We appreciate his time today. And this weekend, Texas, Kentucky, Kroger Field, 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central, ESPN Be sure to follow Ryan's work at the courierjournal.com, at Ryan A. Black. Ryan, we appreciate the time and get home safely.
Hey, Danny, thank you so much. Thanks for having me on.